how to do that then. So I came up to this man when Don Clark finished presenting to the group. I was so overwhelmed. I rushed up to him and told him that I was overwhelmed. I told him I'd never heard anyone be gay like that. How could he do this? I didn't know about this background that I mentioned to you or anything about his circumstances. So I just knew what he was as he came here, presented himself, and talked with the group. It was astounding to me that someone could be like that. So I certainly wanted to be like that. That's what I wanted to be like. I asked him if he could take on, he had someone with him who obviously wanted to learn from him. Bill was his name, so did I. Instantly I was desperate I wanted to learn how to be like this. Could he teach me how to be like this? Right away I asked him. He was really delighted because I was a young cookie. It was very cute. He was very dynamic. And an activist all of my life since 18. Busy activist. I never had led a life that was just like living. It was already pretty sophisticated, I suppose, in some ways. So, but he just bowled me over. I've never met anyone with this kind of balls. He had a thriving business. Being an out gay, historically first out gay psychologist ever in history. Ever. He had a thriving business. As soon as he set up his shingle, people started to come to him. And he was more, it turned out, I begged him if he would take me on. I was just a lowly undergraduate. I was not even a graduate student. So in terms of anything technical, he was not associated with UC Berkeley or anything. Technically, he lived down near Stanford, actually. He was not connected with Stanford. But he had an office in San Francisco, as well as an office in this little place next to Palo Alto. Another kind of office there. But he was even more interested in that. He thought of a person who would like him come out and be gay and be a psychologist to have more of a responsibility than simply to be a gay psychologist. And that was a kind of role in the community. To be out like that in the community. So there were all kinds of professionals who had to do it all the time. Doctors and dentists and so on and so forth. Various kinds of professionals who do it all the time, police and so on. To be that kind of person and gay. And up front, So this fellow Bill who was already in this graduate school, the only out person I know of at that time who was out in this alternate was in School of Professional Psychology, I think it was called. I tried to get in once after I graduated from college. So that's what began my journey in discovering what it really meant to be gay. Great. So I treated, when I began to be aware, because I'm very aware of what I'm feeling in a relative sense, because I was out of the home, I'm describing basically a single mother, older brother, and there are no books on the home, interested in no literature, no culture or anything like that. There's a little bit of this Jewish culture thing, but there's a little bit just the high holidays, that kind of thing. Otherwise we get the steady meals and she keeps everything together and that's it. But there were things I was really nutty about. And so when I started to feel this kind of sexual thing, even though I couldn't tell anyone about it, okay, it was like to me like a super magic. All of a sudden, I would have a certain reaction to certain guys or their bodies or aspects of their bodies that I'd never noticed before. The way I might notice a pretty lizard or a pretty rock or a pretty flower or some animal, zoo, whatever. Or get tripped out at some ride at Disneyland or something like that. It's the same kind of thing like that. But it's this but it's a sexual thing. So in my own experience of things, it's not making judgments or assessments or categorizations, it just is. So it's like, wow, it's like, whoa, I never experienced something like that. It's like uber magic. It's like, whoa, it's like, I don't know if I want to go this route, but it's not like I'm being given a choice kind of thing. And that always really impressed me about this particular magic, because there are many things I found magical in existence, but they didn't have this quality like the sexuality did of compelling, and you want to follow it, and you might want to reach out and touch, my God, it's like, if one is really living in this horrible life where one can't be real, it's like, this is, oh no, I've got to deal with all that kind of stuff too. So right away, I could tell people around me are homophobic. So right away, I don't want to be those homosexual that I'm feeling. These things I'm feeling, I know right away are homosexual. If you were to ask me how it was I knew those were homosexual, it was in the air. People were aware. There was things you didn't talk about. But my mother would make a lot of comments every once in a while about homosexuals or queers, as they might be called, in a disparaging way, little things here and there. She once made a comment about The Well of Loneliness. I didn't even know what the book was. My mother had read it,
wow.
From which I gained several suspicions. She admitted that one day. Wow. I didn't know what the book was. So I knew that I had a big pickle because this uber magical thing didn't go away over time. It stayed like the other things I found magical, like little creatures or rocks or this and that, things that I could find generate this numinous reaction. But this sexual thing, it got horribler and horribler. I don't know. And you had, others of you had to grow up in a world in which you had to not show forth what you were feeling. Other guys could, who were just hetero or whatnot at that age. And one either had to fit in or be attacked, be found out and attacked. A challenging world. So that would result in the pickle I had. And how it came to me to want to handle that, number one, not telling my mother what was the problem. It cooked in my head because I was a strange contemplative creature. I was always aware of what I was suffering or experiencing, and it would stay with me in self-reflection. No one taught me that. As I described, I grew up in this working class environment. There was no education or culture. I was the first person to go to college from my family. It just had come to me. And as to why then I wanted to see a psychologist, that's even more remarkable. I have no explanation for that, except I knew I wanted to learn about psychology. And I don't mean the kind that eventually became what academia does, which is not psychological. In my opinion, it's anti-psychological. But that kind of stuff that Freud and Jung and their descendants. That's what I wanted to learn, and when I was 13, it came to me, this is the way I wanted to puzzle it out. I had a Jewish bar mitzvah, so when you turn 13, you get a bar mitzvah if you're Orthodox. So I had a bar mitzvah, and all that, so I was considered an adult, and so it was the option of raising my concerns in that context. But by that time, I was getting very disillusioned with any kind of religious belief, including the one I was raised with, because it wasn't answering the questions that I had. And I was dreading letting them, such people as Orthodox people, know that I was homosexual. Can you imagine how they would react to that? So I was going to turn in that direction. There were other options, I suppose, still, but it just occurred to me. I told my mother I wanted to see a psychologist. She arranged to take me to this place. There was a place that had been formed some years earlier called the Child Guidance Clinic. It still exists today. And I was taken there. And that was the first person I came out to. Does that maybe answer your question a little bit?
Definitely, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yeah. It's odd how these things happen. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jake.
Jake.
I would imagine that your own internalized shame still popped up even when writing this book. And how did you push through that, and continue in that time period?
How do you imagine that the internalized shame might have popped up?
I would imagine that it would remind you of everything that you were raised to believe about yourself and what it means to be gay. you know, the negative associations you have.
Yes. I went through a period after I started to realize I couldn't be against myself. When I had purposely would notice that my mind would react in those old kinds of habits, those old kinds of thinking. I had to literally go through this time when I would be an activist. And I had to be an activist with my own thinking. And I'd hear my mind say these things that were really bad or nasty or anti-gay or homophobic or repressive or self-denying. You know, I get better at it as I pay attention to it. But at first I didn't want to do that. But when I decided not to be the enemy of myself anymore, I had to go through a self-learning process. And I remember I would have to take when I was entering graduate school, I moved to San Francisco, and I would take the subways there. I didn't really need a car. I'd go on the subways, and I remember I would spend the time traveling around, like to go on the Castro. I live in the Hate District, go to Castro to the Hate District, thinking in my head about how to be affirmative about what I was feeling. And I go through the Castro, which is the nascent gay community at the time. They're just beginning to be gay. And I'd be battling in my own mind with the old ways of thinking, still there, still going on. What are you doing? You're ruining everything. Your mother's going to hate you. Your father's going to hate you. And on this kind of crap would go. And I have to tell myself, like I'm teaching, like a picture. I'm actually a bunch of children. I'm not one person. I'm a bunch of children. And we're all in this little classroom. And there's someone up front of the blackboard. And they're writing, "Gay is good." People were actually saying these kind of things out loud, okay? You know, and I have to say this to myself, right? And I'm one of these organizers of these things. I have to say, gay is, come on, gay is good. I'm trying to feel that. You know, the old feeling is going, fuck that! You know, you're an asshole! You know, because you're right, the old things don't fade away right away, and the old habits go along. So it was a while, it actually was a while, because I could not, after I wouldn't be hypocritical about who I was to others versus who I was to myself, it took me a while to come into sync with it so I could be a gay organizer and not be despising myself. It was maybe about 8 months. I had to work damn hard at it. It was mainly with myself. So that made my answer to the question. What was your name?
Jake.
Jake, thanks very much. Yeah, it was not a quick or easy kind of change. So, yeah, well, I'm still here. Well, we're almost out of time. Any other questions?
This is more a comment.
Okay.
For people that
Yes,
are interested
please.
in the book.
That's Wendell.
My name's Wendell.
Thank you.
I have found copies of some of the original volumes and some of the old volumes at the youth book section of the archives, the Gay and Lesbian Archives at USC.
Wow.
We've gotten a few copies of those over the years.
Okay.
I was curious though whether the new volume is it still available at all? Do you know? Or
In print, you mean?
I know that they said they were going to take it out of print, but I've seen it show up occasionally in a circus of books for
My
sale.
guess is it would be out of print by now.
The last time I looked, I didn't see it. I had seen it in the last year.
Really?
A couple of times,
Weird.
copies showed up over there.
That's so weird. Yeah, for sale, you mean?
Yeah.
It's so weird to still see that.
Well, then
I used to go in a different light when there was still a different light. I'd go over to where my book was. Now I think that not really visionary was. Distributed it that way. But there'd be the second edition and then in the 90s, and I'd sign it. I just signed them. And put them back on the shelf.
You
You
can Google it. I know use
Yeah.
and come up with some.
Okay.
occasionally.
Yeah, I'm sure it's available.
Men Loving Men is available on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's both the original edition
Wow,
and
okay.
the revised edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, there you go. That answers your question. Okay, well, my apologies. I always like to have a little community time too, you know, when there's not any leader and listeners at all. And get to mingle in other kinds of ways because they don't like it when you're past 9:30. You know, it may look like the people's, you know, collective of West Hollywood here, but it's really, you know, tyranny. You know, we have to be out pretty soon. They don't like it if they linger after 9:30. They don't like us. We're okay as long as it's before that time, so my apologies. Eventually we have more of a community space, I hope, and be able to engage in this and not just go on with the presentation so long. Here we are again, going on to the last minute of the presentation. So, okay, I'm going to hand it over to Roger, and he's going to say a few final words in closing tonight, okay? And I want to mention to you that I will be doing the same kind of thing, thank you, Roger, the same kind of thing next month, because the other book, which kind of came out of doing this first book, appears on the reading list. And I thought it'd be really interesting for those who are going to have to read it, or parts of it, as a way of studying, be aware of some context, and if that was going to be the case. So, for example, if this would have been a seminar series run by Don Kilhefner and Jim Kempner in the old days, I might have come to their meeting in which my stuff was featured. I would do that for them. It's like with Jim Kempner often, before he had his formal place, his library reading his home, and he'd have a group right in the middle of it. He always loved to teach people things. And when it would be the Mitch Walker week, I would come there and either read from stuff or be weird if I was in the weird period. So I thought, oh, there's these stupid old books are in this reading list, for these guys. So, if it was a regular training deal in the old way, that I would come to one of those meetings. But they have more important fish to fry in those meetings. So I thought, oh, we could do it at a general meeting, and all you, for better or worse, can get exposed to me giving a little bit of context to these books. And the reason I'm doing this is because I saw them on this reading list. I wanted to make sure that those who were attendants who were members of the training could have a chance to be exposed to a little bit of context as well, since they're going to have to look at the books, and if others were interested, that's great. Otherwise, it's very kooky old stuff. Okay, thanks very much. That'll do it. Thank you for coming. We'll continue, and we'll get into visionary love next time. I'll try not to be too kooky. That's a really weird one. Please.
All right. So, as Mitch just said, on November 5th will be the part 2 of tonight's this mini-series, The Intent and Promise of Visionary Love. And just to let you know, you can also get copies of Visionary Love, for those of you who may not have a copy. You can get copies of Visionary Love on Amazon Marketplace as well. They're a little more expensive. It's more of a rare item. I think it's around $40 for it. But you can, there are some available.